Thank you, Rob, for that wonderful introduction. And the rocks that were in back, rocks that I've got back there, Dr. Ed Holroyd, helped me find a lot of those things. So I'm indebted to him. So this journey started in 2014, which we will amplify on here in just a moment. Title of my talk is In Search of Noah's Flood. That's really what it is. It's search for the flood evidence. That's where it all started. But this talk is also a very basic talk, and it's wonderful for young students or early young Christians as well. I got the pleasure of speaking to the group down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and boy, there's been some high-powered speakers come from that place, and so I gave this little talk down there, and one fellow came up and says, he asked me two things. He says, one, he says, did you discover this stuff? Yeah, I found all this stuff. Okay, or did somebody else? No, I found it. Okay. And then later on, another fellow came up and he says, it was a good basic talk. I took that as a positive note, but I think they were looking for something a little more up in the air. So why was a global flood? Why was there a global flood in the days of Noah? Because of increased corruption on the earth, the Lord saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Was it a worldwide flood? And God said, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth, not Mesopotamia, earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. For behold, I will bring a flood waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, which has the breath of life under heaven, and everything that is on the earth shall die. And all the waters prevailed so heavily, so mightily on the earth, that all the high mountains of the whole heavens were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits. Did everything and everyone die? Yep. All flesh died. All swarming creatures, all mankind, everything on dry land, in whose nostrils had the breath of life. He blotted out every living thing is on the face of the ground. And they were blotted out from the earth. Who lived? Only Noah was left, and those who were with him on the ark. So was it a worldwide flood? The entire earth was covered with water. At no place was there any land that was not under water. All air-breathing critters died. Animals, birds, snakes, finally mankind, except Noah and his family, and the critters then were with him. So how did they survive? How did Noah and his family survive this flood? It was a worldwide flood. He said, go make yourself an ark. Go build it. Here's how you make it. Make it as long as a football field. Okay, they didn't have football back then, but a little bit longer than a football field. We know what that means. So make yourself an ark. So, sidebar question, where on earth did he build that ark? I wish somebody told me. So he said, take some provisions with you. Every sort of food that is eaten, store it up. It shall be served as food for you and for them. And Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. He did all that God commanded him. Is there a lesson there? Is there a lesson there? Three basic functions of the flood. The eruptive phase, the flooding stage, and then the retreating and flood runoff stage. Those three basic functions of the flood. And those are, we get that understanding, and I think I've got that understanding now. You'll go a long ways to understanding the rest of what went on in the flood. I made this little chart. Some of you have seen this chart or something like it. Yeah, it came from Dr. Michael Lord. I just modified it. I made it myself so I can add notes, etc. to it. But it's the same chart. So you can see the three phases there. You have the eruptive. Whoop, wrong button here. Wrong button. Okay. You got the eruptive phase, the flooding phase, the retreating phase. The water went up, continued to go up at 151 days. It started going back down. Okay. When the water went up, a lot of things happened. A lot of things got tore up. A lot of dirt got moved around. A lot of sedimentary layers got planted. During the retreating stage, oh my. That's where you see what you see today. The evidence from the retreating stage. There is so much to see. And that's what I enjoy seeing. Is this the evidence from this. By the way, this chart is in the back of the room. And with every place on here, you'll see a number. There's number 2, there's number 1, 3, 6, etc. There's scripture verses that go for every one of those. So on the back side of this sheet, you'll find in the back of the room, take that. It's to me, it's fun to go into some place and somebody that's been in this presentation, they got this hanging on the wall and it makes me feel good, of course. But anyway, I can't take credit for this chart. This comes from Dr. Michael Ward, so I'm embedded what he's done. So in that, the first is eruptive phase. In the eruptive phase, bad things happen. We have something like an egg that cracks open. When an egg cracks open, things start spewing forth. It opened up like an egg. That's probably the best way to describe what actually happened here, okay? And so the mechanism of the flood were suddenly unleashed at that point in time. And on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. When they say all, there wasn't not just water. There was some magma and a lot of rocks. I wouldn't have wanted to been close to that crack anywhere. So all the fountains of the great deep burst forth and the windows of heavens were opened. Okay, so 40 days of extreme rain were unleashed, plus likely earth and debris fell in the sky. This is what Pangea looked like prior to the split. We think this is a perspective from a lot of smart people have figured out it must have looked something like this and rearranged the continents that they might have hooked together something like this. So, all right. So how did the fountains of the deep burst forth? That's a big question. Some people say a large meteorite struck an impact, might have. A process called hydroplate theory, might be what it is. A process called catastrophic plate tectonics, might have been that too. Okay, so this talk is basically on the CPT theory. So during the pre-flood, we had Pangea. Okay, and then the fountains of the deep burst forth, and then the continents started moving apart. Okay, and then the continents were starting to get displaced and moving around. This is what blows my mind. You had continents moving at 5 miles an hour. Just think of one of these coal trains, and we have them go by our place all the time. They're not our place, but they're in town, 100-car coal trains. And try to stop one of those. They don't stop real quick. They stop, when we see them, they stop pretty gently. But if they had to say stop now, they're not going to stop right now. They're going to go on and on and on. And the same thing was happening with continents. When things stop, things are going to have to happen. So this is what could be the spreading point of the fountains of the deep when they open up. We have these the C4 spreading areas. We know that they're spreading at perhaps about 5 to 10 millimeters a year. Okay, but at that time they were spreading apart about 5 miles an hour. That's a lot of spreading. Here's a picture of a mid-Atlantic ridge as it passes through Iceland. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Here's another view of that. And it's like, yeah, that's where it passed through when it goes through Island, okay? And so the windows of heavens were opened. Upwelling magma jettisoned steam into the atmosphere, causing intense global rain. We had seafloor spreading going on at that time, which caused displacement of the ocean water onto the continent. So when the water came up, go back there. When the water came up under the ocean, you can imagine you're pushing the water up. The water's got to go someplace that's up at the shoreline. So it just went on shore. And so we caused tremendous flooding and potentially some serious tsunamis at the same time. So you covered the deep as with a garment, and the water stood above the mountains. At your rebuke, they fled. At the sound of your thunder, they took flight. And an often quoted scripture verse, the mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place that you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that you might not again, so that they might not again cover the earth. Meanwhile, back on the bark, not your normal cruise, not your normal cruise. I can kind of imagine what it was like on the ark. We had dinner a while ago and we were discussing how many windows are on the ark. The word says they put a window on the side. Okay, that's one window for that whole ark. It's gonna be kind of dark inside. Other pictures you see of a whole row of windows up top. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out someday. I intend to ask. Flooding stage. There's 3 stages. The eruptive stage, flooding, and retreating stages. So we've gone through the eruptive, now the flooding stages. Now the water starts, remember that graph? Now the water starts coming up and it keeps coming up until the 151st day. So that's the flooding stage. The flooding stage was like a year-long flash flood. The flood was not a local flood like Katrina. By the way, anybody know any Katrinas here? Yeah, there's somebody in the back knows. Would the real Katrina please stand up?
She left the building.
She left, oh.
She ran away. She didn't want to be there.
We had dinner tonight. Katrina was there, Amanda's friend, and it was so fun to tease her about that name. And anyway, so it was like a year-long flash flood, not like Katrina, but it was a global worldwide flood that differed in size and intensity from any local flood. The Garden of Eden, gone forever. I remember here a while back, there was an article in the paper or something, and it said, we think we know where the Garden of Eden is. At that point in time, I bid it, hook, line, and sinker. Yeah, I think they got the right idea. No, we have no idea where the Garden of Eden is. The world, the earth was so torn up because of the flood. Flooding stage continued. As the fountains of the deep were broken up, many plate tectonic movements, in other words, continents spreading apart, generated numerous earthquakes, resulting in an immense number of tsunamis. I remember John Morris, in one of his books, stated that the tsunamis that were had during the flood were 1,000 times worse than any tsunamis we've ever seen here. Can you imagine that? 1,000 times worse. So as the ocean plates pushed apart, molten rock emerged, creating a new ocean floor. I talked about that a few minutes ago. The new ocean floor was dense and rose and pushed up the sea level and caused a surge of ocean water onto the continents. Continuing, superstorms were generated in the atmosphere as a result of supersonic stream jets at the crustal fracture zones, catapulting ocean water aloft before they fell down the earth. Torrential rains, flood water currents at least 100 miles an hour, and some people say 1,000 miles an hour in certain places of the earth. Twice daily tides and yet no mountains, tremendous tidal surges moved across the submerged continents. Result, redistribution and pulverization of sediments and sedimentary layers, one layer on top of another. Flooding stage continued. The first portion of the flood planed off much of the earth with violent tsunamis. Followed immediately with that material redeposited as sedimentary layers on top of that. Here is Fountain Creek, now Two Springs, and you see what's called basement rock. It has been planed off. And guess what's on top of it? Sedimentary layers and planed, but in a different direction, different axis. Look, I keep pushing on button. Anyway, there's your basement rock with some apparently strata here. Not easy to see here. But then sedimentary layers on top. It had planed off this section and then deposited on top with flood layers. What's basement rock? I gave a talk here a while back and finally my wife says, honey, what's basement rock? Okay, obviously I need to explain it. That's okay, it's a good question. Basement rock is rock before the flood. Pretty simple, I think. Rock before the flood, before there was a flood. There may be a more technical explanation for it. That's my explanation, okay? Rock before the flood. There's another picture of basement rock with Dr. Tim Clary of ICR giving one of his tours at the canyon. And there's your strata from the original basement rock, okay? And there's the sedimentary layers on top of it. But look, it got planed off. It got planed off and the layers then deposited on top of it. Well, I'd sure like to go on one of those tours. Right on top, the very first layer right on top is called the Tapeats sandstone layer, the first layer over the basement rock. The Tapeats sandstone layer, it stretches from Mexico to Eastern Canada up through the Arctic Circle. I've been to the Arctic Circle. I don't know if I saw it or not, but it's amazing when I read that. Wow. There had to be a worldwide flood to have that same sandstone layer through that region. Here's a schematic of the Grand Canyon. The actual canyon being off to the right here, there's the Colorado River. And a schematic representation of the different strata that's there. And there's your pre-flood basement rock, the Tapeats sandstone, and then other layers up on top. The Coconino sandstone on top, of course, known as the bathtub ring, okay? So the flooding stage continues. Noah's flood continued to rise, sedimentary layers continued to accumulate, okay? Layer upon layer, as the surface of the earth was scoured, scraped, and redeposited. All right, sedimentary layer, another definition, also known as sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks that often have distinctive layering or bedding. Many of the picturesque views of the desert Southwest, Morgan County too, okay, show mesas and arches made of layered sedimentary rock of sandstone, limestone, and shale. And there's, of course, Grand Canyon with many sedimentary layers, as you can see here. And that's the classic view of the Grand Canyon. Linda and I took a trip back to the Arc here a 3 years ago. We came back on I-70 and we came across an area in central Kansas known as the Flint Hills area. Well, that's a pretty area, rolling hills. And what is also interesting here, we talk about geomorphology in that these are cut off. See how they're cut off there? See, you have sedimentary layers across here, but they're cut off. You got a valley there, and then you got another hilltop over here. Sedimentary layer. There's a beautiful rock, by the way, the Flint Hills rock. Sedimentary layers, of course, in Green River near the Dinosaur National Monument, okay? And you have a layered cake. That's my best example to give to young people about sedimentary layers and how they formed, is through a layered cake. Mom made that cake one layer at a time. But on the one layer at a time, that's the way it was built. And later on, she comes along with a knife and cuts out a nice big chunk. And what you have left is layered layers. Meanwhile, back at the ark. And all the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and livestock, beasts, and all swarming creatures that swam on the earth. And all mankind, everything in dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died, only Noah was left. And those were here with him. The waters prevailed on the earth at that point in time. Okay, the ark is grounded now at the 151st day. So on the seventh day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. They were still on the boat. Excuse me. Then we changed stages. So we've had the eruptive stage, the flooding stage, the retreating stage. This is the most important stage from a geomorphology perspective or flood evidence perspective. This is what we see today. This is what we see today is the retreating stage, okay? So the last half of the flood, known as a retreating stage. And it was a retreating stage that impacted what we see now on Earth. First, you had massive sheet flow. Second, you had water accelerates the erosional section. The tops of the earth started appearing. The water's gone, and we're left with water gaps and wind gaps. Okay. And the waters continue to abate. The tops of the mountains are seen. The waters are abating or running off the surface. The mountaintops are seen. The oceans was sinking. Catastrophic erosion was now taking place on a big time scale. Some of you may have seen this. I think Dr. Orr showed this last month. That I really appreciate this, and it's worth reviewing and looking at the four stages that really happened from the standpoint of the flood was the sheet flow stage, which we see here. Okay, the earth is still buried underneath the water, but the water is running along extremely high rates, okay? And then you have notches that are starting to be carved below the water. Notches starting to be carved below the water, okay? The mountaintops just starting to begin to pick up, and now they're being exposed, and now big time things are happening in these notches right here. Big time things are happening there. Water actually accelerates through there, and you get tremendous erosion at that point. And really what you have is a nozzle effect, a water nozzle effect. You ever taken a hose, just put it into your lawn? If you get caught, kids, don't do that. You get in trouble. Just start digging a hole pretty good. It'll make a mess of your lawn. So as the water narrows in the channels, it would accelerate and focus power. And that's what happened, is that water went through those channels. Okay. The same amount of water flowing at the beginning of this nozzle has got to come out the back end, but at a much faster rate, at a speed that can do some serious damage. So in the end, you end up with a couple of gaps, one called a wind gap, one called a water gap. The only difference between the two, one has water in it. Yeah. Maybe there's a river or a creek, and this one has none, okay? So those are your four basic stages, and Dr. Orr and Dr. Cass Walker and Reed for this principle. So I really enjoy this principle. I can see it whenever I drive around. When I drove down here this afternoon, I can see this stuff. So here's a wind gap example from Weld County. there is a ridge line that runs probably 10 or 15 miles along here, and all of a sudden, whoops, what happened here? So I went up the road and I found a road that went back north and went back up in there, and there's nothing there, creek, no nothing, just opening. So it's an eroded area that eroded away that ridge, and so because there's no water in it, they call it a wind gap. So in the 600th and first day of the year, the first day of the month, the waters were dried off from the earth, and Noah removed the covering, and the earth, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Okay, but there's still another 56 days to go. The ground was dry, but can you imagine what that ground looked like? Were there any trees standing? Was there any grass growing? Was there anything growing? Well, there probably was an olive tree someplace out there, right? As we know, he sent out the dove. So it's funny. Darwin was apparently curious about olive trees and salt water. He had to run his own test. And guess what? They lived after a long period of time. Funny. Okay. All right. So the ground was dry. So then the end of the flood, in the second month, the seventh day, then the earth had dried out, and God said, go out of the ark, take your wife, bring all the animals. Why is Colorado called colorful Colorado? Because of scenes like this one, okay? Scenes like this one were created when the mountains went up and the valleys went down. Yeah. Scenes like that one. They sank. I love scenes like this. We live in a wonderful area. But also, water, when did they rise up? That was a question that pondered me. On the 225th day of the flood, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. Oh, 225th day. That's getting towards the end of the flood. There's our answer, right from Scripture. So if there was a worldwide catastrophic flood, there ought to be plenty of evidence right here where I live. So in March 2014, went to the doctor and I said, doctor, I don't feel so good. And he says, Mr. Feltz, you have rheumatoid arthritis. Not a good idea that you travel anymore. So getting on airplanes is not a good idea because you'll catch something too easily. And so we prayed about it, and we decided to close down the business. We had our own business, and very successful business. And so we shut it down, and I started volunteering at Riverview Christian School. And I'm still volunteering at Riverview Christian School, but with a new name, okay? But anyway, so I was at that school, and they needed a bus driver, and so I drove the bus and did a bunch of other things. But the school had a largely abandoned library. Guess what they had in that library? The World That Perished by John Whitcomb. Hello, my eyes got opened when I read that book. I had it all figured out, really, I did. 1,000 years is a day, days is 1,000 years. Okay, he created the world in 1,000 days. I had it figured out. I didn't know how to figure out the seventh day. Rested for 1,000 years? No, it didn't make sense. But anyway, that's how I had it figured out. But I found out that he created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and there really was a worldwide flood. And this book explained it very, very clearly to me. Very, very clearly to me. So another book was given to me by Dr. Walter Brown, and it's a huge book. I read most of the book, and unfortunately, I'm a bit confused after reading some section of it, but I think my confusion is pretty well cleared up of those confusion points. But Dr. Brown writes a wonderful, wonderful detailed book. So those books led me to the field of geomorphology, the study of the physical features of the earth. The book of Genesis, chapters 6, 7, and 8. God's extreme displeasure with mankind, God's plan and dictated plans to Noah, the flood, beginning, intensity, and the end. And the more I read, the more I wanted to read, the more I wanted to understand. I says, this had to be a real event. I wanted to see more. So we got a camper. He says, we'll be snowbirds. We'll go to Arizona and we will see all kinds of flood evidence. That's exactly what we did. We saw all kinds of flood evidence, but that's in Arizona and Grand Canyon and all. So if a flood was a worldwide flood, does that include Northeast Colorado? I had to find out. I had to find out. So camper, finally it got sold. There were other issues. We had to sell it, reason we had to sell it anyhow. I miss it sometimes, but that's life. Move on. Washington County. One day, Linda and I took a drive out towards Akron. As we were coming back, Linda says, look at that. What are you looking at? It was a bluff, Fremont's Butte, pardon me. Fremont's Butte. It's in Washington County. That's absolute first flood evidence I saw up there. Okay, it was in Washington County, but that's just east of Morgan County. Okay, so it's an interesting place, but there's flood evidence right there. You have a flat top mountain. You have a lot of missing dirt over here. In fact, I believe the water tended to flow in this direction from what I can been able to surmise. And so the water washed away the dirt. You have an erosional remnant here. Okay. So what's the definition of erosional remnant? A feature of the landscape standing above the general level in which the erosion has reduced its surrounding. Okay, that's from Merriam-Webster. Okay. Then I went to Amarillo. ICR had a big conference down there a number of years ago. So I went down there alone. Linda was not able to go. And I'm getting Linda, and I got down there. This microphone working? All right, like that. Says it's on. Did I push the pause button? Try this. Radioactive. Yeah.
They're both radioactive.
Check 1, 2, 3.
This has probably got a bad battery. Continue using this and I'm going to try to pull the battery.
All right. We will continue using this one while Rob changes batteries. So I'm headed down to Amarillo, actually coming back from Amarillo. I saw these things on the way down. And while I was down in Amarillo, I talked to one of the fellows down there. I said, what are all these rocks up there? He said, oh, you mean the cap rocks? Oh, what you call me out? Cap rocks. We call them the cap rocks. And so down there, so I came back and I started taking some close looks at what the cap rocks look like. And it's an erosional remnant of a Noah's flood. There's a bunch of them down there. It's a fascinating area to see. Logan County. Logan County is a little bit further northeast of Morgan County. That's where Sterling, Colorado is located. And I took a drive over there and I found, guess what? I found No Name Butte. I know it's No Name Butte because Harry Thompson owns a ranch it's on. I said, what do you call that, Harry? No name. No Name Butte. But look what's missing. All that's left from the sheet flow is channelized erosion and No Name Butte. Weld County. Weld County. Now we're talking. Okay, I wish it was Morgan, but it's Weld County. It's north of us. Okay, let's get your bearings here. All right. You can see an outline of Weld County. Okay, there's the outline. Here we are. We live here in Brush, and Fort Morgan is where we hold our creation meetings. But up here in the Pawnee National Grasslands area, it's more than just grass up there, I assure you. Ed Holroyd, almost couldn't keep him in the car. You know, he's a bird watcher, and there's a bird. He's lots of beautiful, interesting birds up there in the Pawnee National Grassland, but a lot of other things too relative to the flood. They have Pawnee Buttes, okay? They have the Chalk Bluffs. The Chalk Bluffs, by the way, are a series of bluffs that run almost 100 miles from just north of Sterling to just north of I-25. And there's been a lot of geologists study that since the 1880s, the Chalk Bluffs. Amazing, amazing. They don't say anything about flood, of course, but they keep studying it. Then there's seashells, lots of seashells we found up in there. Then there's planed off surfaces, and there's huge gravel bars. The gravel bars, by the way, have not been lost to the gravel quarry people. There's at least 3 gravel bars that I've seen up there. One of them owned by an outfit up in Wyoming. So yeah, gravel bars. There's large erosional remnants, tons of river rock. Oh, more on that in a minute. Okay, petrified wood, you bet there's petrified wood up there. At least 3 gravel quarries, I mentioned that. And guess what? No river within 40 miles. No river within 40 miles. Pawnee Buttes looking south. It's an erosional remnant, okay? Probably the best thing that it's known for up there. Yeah, up there, Pawnee Buttes. That's, people go up to see Pawnee Buttes. Okay, that's what they go to see, erosional remnants. And guess what? Remember the layered cake? Let's go back. You see the layers here? There's your layered cake effect, okay?
That petrified chocolate icing on top.
Somebody wants chocolate cake?
The question was, is that petrified chocolate icing on top?
That's a good question. I'll have him go up there and check it out. All right. So there's 4 types of water erosion in the retreating stage of Noah's flood. There's the sheet flow, nominally 60 to 100 mile an hour. Kurt Wise says perhaps at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. Can you imagine that? Water flow that fast? Sheet flow evolved into channelized flow, lower water levels to almost total channelized, and finally in the end, what's all that's left is water gaps, and the water flows in the channels in the absence of water. And we already talked about this slide, the 4 different stages of the retreating, 4 different levels of the phases, if you will, the retreating stage, okay? Back up 1. This one is a channelized water erosion that I want to really show here in this effect, because it really see that in this next slide. There's Pawnee Buttes from a different angle, looking straight west. Okay. Over the southwest, there's the northwest. There's that Chalk Bluffs that runs for about 100 miles. That's another piece of it right there. Okay, they found a dinosaur up there back in the 1890s or 1900s. 1900. I think it ended up Wyoming someplace. Okay, so then here's a water spillway. The water spillway came along here. You have channelized flow, and a lot of water went down through at one time. So, okay. Again, the nozzle effect is in play here. We're doing a lot of water washing and a lot of moving of dirt around, okay? Northeastern Weld County is another interesting place. And this is a place that I find absolutely fascinating. Numerous river rocks and gravel bars. We're almost 1,000 feet higher than the South Platte where we live, and 1,400 feet higher than the North Platte where Scotts Bluff is, okay? Secular geologist says there never was a flood. It never happened. I remember getting a discussion with a geologist when we were snowbirds, and he kind of laughed at me anyway, but that's the way it was. But let's take a look at the evidence. Okay, I have to show this picture of what river rocks look like. So when I show this up in Fort Morgan to the kids or to our group up there, we don't have river rocks in the river. It's all sand. It's nothing but sand. You go out the river, the South Platte. They don't know what river rocks looks like unless they go to the bank. And they use these things to decorate and to landscape the place, okay? And there's a close-up view of river rocks, okay? I know that you know what river rocks are. So I've identified gravel bars known to geologists as lags, okay? So the definition of a lag is a deposition of material winnowed by physical action. That could be wind, okay? So lag deposits are found in processes such as central island formations in streams and rivers. Wikipedia, in streams and rivers. There's another definition. Strong currents eroding and uplifting the western United States would have pulverized much of the rock, but most of the resistant rock would have carried far from their source and deposited as a lag or as a basin fill. Here's the lag. Here's the lag. This lag is about a half a mile long. About a half a mile long. This is in northeastern Weld County. There's your county road for your coordinates. Okay. This is just one of a number of lags that are up there. Just one of a number that are up there. Okay. Now, what I want you to look at also is for this next slide, the benefit of this next slide is where this X is at. Because I'm going to have the camera looking to the west towards the end of that lag. We have a new plan.
Give me a minute.
Where did you, how were you able to get that picture? Is that from something like
Google Earth.
Google? Okay.
Oh yeah, very complex. Google Earth. I mean, this is like you want to find out Lutheran Baptist Church, okay? Over in the corner there it says satellite view. Click it. And there you have it. That's pretty easy to do. And then all I did was copy it and pasted it. Thank you. So yeah, that's how you get that. I've got some others along there as well. So we went up there and Ed Holroyd was along with me on one of those trips. And so we went back up to this place and right where you see the X, okay, I'm taking a picture and looking west in this picture here. There it is. That's what it looks like on end view. It's a cone-shaped thing, but that one is about a half a mile long. There's those others that we saw up there, they're all have a conical shape to it, but elongated conical shape. It's like a maintainer was there. He went along and he had this big digger and it went up to a ramp and it just rode it and he just slowly moved down. There is no maintainers up there. Okay. Here's what the rocks look up close like. There's some business cards as a perspective. Okay. Beautiful rocks. So I'm up there and Ed was up there and I says, ask a dumb question, I guess, but anyway. I says, Ed, where did these rocks come from? He says, over there. What do you mean over there? From the mountains. Oh, right, yeah, that's where the mountains are 100 miles away. 100 miles away, these river rocks have come down there. They're beautiful, beautiful rocks. So just west a few miles is another gravel bar in line with the gravel bar we just viewed, okay? And it's at Cemetery Hill, okay? So you go into the cemetery, drive into the cemetery, under the cemetery grounds, you park right up here in the corner and then cross the barbed wire fence and you walk right up to the top of that hill. And that's where we went next. Took Ed up there and here's a picture looking back towards the other gravel bar that we were just at with all the river rocks at it. You just barely see it rising above here, but this lag ran this way and then it kind of ran that direction, okay? And so And then the next picture shows us looking west now, this time, looking towards Pawnee Buttes, which we've seen a couple of times now. You can see Pawnee Buttes off there at distance. Sure, can't you see that? Okay, let me help you out. There it is, Pawnee Buttes. Look at them sticking up there, like centennials on the plain, as they would say. But where's the dirt? See anything missing? A lot of sedimentary layers are missing from this view. Just amazing. By the way, the oil patch people are really, really busy up there. 10 years ago, there was nobody up there. They also have petrified wood. This piece, which is back in the back table back here, they call it ironwood. That's what the rock shop guy said. And anyway, it was given to me by my friend Carl, who has some ranch property, and he fixing fence posts, and he says just laying on the ground. He might even try to kick it with his toe. Wouldn't have been a good idea because it's extremely hard and heavy. But you take a look at it. I took it to Tucson and had it cut in two, and it's what you can see there. You'll see it in the back table. Lamar County, of course, north of here. In 1951, we moved to Lamar County up to Virginia Dale. Anybody know where Virginia Dale is? Yeah, a few people did it. Okay. Anyway, it's right on the state line at 287 between Fort Collins and Laramie, right on the state line. Okay. And as you go up 287, as you travel up that road, you will see Steamboat Rock. And so here's Steamboat Rock. That's what it looks like. And I looked at that as a young man looking along there and says, wow. I didn't even know what question to ask. Wow, Steamboat Rock. I was 10 years old at the time, you know. By the time I was 18, I got a chance to actually go hunting, hiking up on top, and I found a whole bunch of dates up there dating back to the 1800s. Kind of fascinating place. So what about Castle Rock? You ever think about how Castle Rock actually got there? You've thought about that. Good. I see some head nodding. Okay. Morgan County, that's where I live. Okay. This band here is where Lynn and I hang out. We hang out between Fort Morgan and Brush all the time. Our creation meetings are here. Brush is here. So I-76 runs back up here, heads up towards Sterling, and finally off to Nebraska. There's a highway that goes between Fort Morgan and north on Highway 52, and eventually ends up at Kimball, Nebraska. As you're heading up the road, most of the people, they get out of Fort Morgan and it's pedal to the metal and let's go. Okay. So they get pedal to the metal until they hit these curves, and they better slow down or they will not be pedal to metal very long. It's called the area called the Wildcats, or Wildcat Creek. And it is, in my opinion, it is a flood evidence. Not a whole lot to see up there, but it is a flood evidence. Okay. So Wildcat Creek is seasonal. It runs and disappears when it does run. Secular geologists would say the creek carved it. Okay. They say the same thing about Grand Canyon, except they call it river carved it. Okay. They did it in about 6 million years. That's all. Not enough water, most creation geologists would say. I believe the Wildcat Canyon is a flood remnant by channelized erosion. So if we look at that a little closely here, we see the flood in the sheet flow phase, the sheet flow erosion. A lot of water ran probably from the northwest to the southeast, and a lot of erosion. Then we started getting some erosion underneath the water. That's the first stage. The second stage, then we actually have a channel that's been cut through here. Still some water running on both sides of this creek. And finally, you have the last stage, the final stage, the remnant of this flood, the flood. Wildcat Creek, Wildcat Canyon. It's a wonderful place. A lot of good place for bird watching. There's a fellow painted a whole book of birds that he had discovered, watercolor. And I've seen that book. It's beautiful. Another place in Morgan County is southwest Morgan County. And Linda and I were again looking around for evidence for Noah's flood and get kind of disappointed. And I did a topographical search. I found out the highest hill in Morgan County was Bidwell Hill. Let's go look at Bidwell Hill. It's down in Morgan County, so southwest part of the county. So we drove down there one Sunday afternoon and eureka. I found my evidence. I looked at that and I said, that looks like coal. Looks like coal. In fact, it looks like 2 layers of coal. So this is a picture taken from the road. At that time, I didn't have permission to drive over there. I found out who owned it. And found out the name of the man. He called, sure, go on and take a look at it. No problem. Just let me know when you're going in. So we did. Went over there, took a look at it. And I found some amazing things. And then I called my friend Ed. And Ed, he came up, looked at it, and says, yep, it's coal. And in the back on the table is some of that very lignite coal in a bag. But that's not all that's there. That's not all that's there, okay? So we looked at it, Ed gathered some samples and different things. 4 feet down, 30 feet down is a 4-foot layer of coal I found out from the ranch owner. And he said, yeah, actually, years ago, they used to mine it further south of this property. But I found something else just absolutely blew me away when I seen this. A layer that is 14 to 16 inches thick of seashells. Seashells, tons of seashells. And you will see those same seashells back on the table. So if any one of you young people want one of those seashells, you take them, okay? Not a problem, okay? Those, we find them there, interesting, in 2 phases. Some are petrified and some are not. In other words, the rock that they're around is hardened. Whether that would make the seashell petrified, I don't know. But some is in hardened rock, chunks of it, they have to push out of the way. And it's amazing. So this is some of the seashells that you might find in something like that, all right? And the seashells are so numerous that the farmers picked up on something that I didn't remember, except when I was a kid on the farm. We would give the chickens shells, and the seashells would make their eggs stronger. So they do that, is dig them up, take them from the chicken pen. So this is kind of another view of this same bluff that we're looking at here, where we have 2 layers of coal. We have 2 layers of coal. There's the seashells right here. You can walk right up to them. They're just high, pretty easy to look at. Whoop. And then, so we got lots of layers here. So if you look at that, way down the bottom, we have the basement rock, which is in the bottom of the Denver Basin. And then we have flood layers that come up, say, to this particular level. Then there's your layer of seashells, another sedimentary layer, a coal layer, more flood layers, another coal layer, then more flood strata, and guess what's up on top? Ice age, wind-blown sand. And that sand came from the flood. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Talk about the coal just a moment. Notice that coal there and that previous slide is not that far from the top, maybe 6 or 8 feet, something like that. So coal is compressed plant matter that has been altered by an oxygen-free hot environment. But this is the key point I want to make. The oxygen-free hot environment was caused by deep burial in sediment. 6 to 8 feet is not deep. I can dig a post hole that deep, but I used to be able to. So this, of course, means the coal typically was under high pressure and that it was buried a lot more than what we see there now. So a lot of dirt that planed off the top of that surface. This is another pit, the other side of Bidwell Hill, and this has what is called band sorting, and there is a number of layers of seashells through here. Amazing. Deposited in a column C ocean setting? I don't think so. I don't think so. All right, another gravel pit, Morgan sand and gravel. Okay, let's take a look at that pit. Just north of Fort Morgan, right up in here is Morgan sand and gravel. So I went up there and talked to the manager, told him what I was doing. He says, yeah, I'll go up and have a good time. Okay, just don't get near the bluffs because they might fall down on you. Okay, we'll do that. So I went up there, went on the east side of the gravel pit and started looking at that, at digging, and I was really surprised what I found. Chalk. Chalk. Think the White Cliffs of Dover. It's chalk. Here's a big chunk of mine. That same chunk is back on the table back here. So same thing. They're made up of little tiny shells. So I put them under a microscope and I said, see what I can see. And all I could see what appeared to be fingers, because it was just an inexpensive microscope, but I seen what looked like fingers. But then later on, I found out what I was really looking at. This is a forum, is the abbreviated word for that. Kind of looks like Fibonacci's number to me, to you. And that is a very small shell. That's 30 times larger than a human. The diameter of human hair is 30 times larger, what I'm trying to say. Okay, back to the pit. So we're looking at the bluff, looking at the chalk, and how many layers can you count there? There are a lot of sedimentary layers just in this small section, okay? And I talked to Greg, the pit manager, about it, about all these things, and here you can see some cross bedding down here. And he says, you know, I look at that and I says, there had to be a flood. There had to be a flood. That came from the pit manager. So lots of evidence for worldwide flood about 4,300 years ago. This next one is something that I've not shown before in this presentation. I've discovered up northwest of Fort Morgan, either mud bells and or concretions. And I find it absolutely fascinating. It's an area that I call Lowell Junction, because my friend Lowell Woodward, who died a number of years ago, he told me there was some place on County Road 10. He says, well, there's a bunch of fossils. Okay, so I went searching and finally I found County Road 10, but I found a lot more than fossils. Yep, there's fossils there, but there's an interesting geomorphology here, what's going on with this thing. It's a planation surface from here. It's as flat as a pancake. When you go north, get above this is a ridge right here. You drive along and you go over this hill, and then it's just flat as a pancake. And here, it's been eroded down and eroded down, okay, all along there. And this ridge runs for several miles, okay? So it's a line of erosion that you can see there. But what you see is what you see below this line is what I want to point out here. Down here, I have something called 3-foot mud balls, or are they concretions? I don't know. Okay, here's what I have a title concretion, might not be. There's a picture of it. There's the size of my truck in the background. Okay, look at this one. I call it my saucer rock. I've been told that's a concretion. I mean, these things are huge. I have my friends, Isaac, and can't see who that is. Isaac and his brother anyway. They stood by it. And these things are just huge. Here's another rock. I call it my tractor tire rock. And it's apparently a concretion. Here we go again. My friend Silas with another mystery rock. A mystery rock. But look on the other side what we see on that mystery rock. Ah, what is that? What do we see here? What is that? I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty strange. You know, my mind goes, well, it's a bone and stuff. middle part is hollow. I don't know what it is. How did it get on the outside of that rock? Is this evidence for a mud ball? And here's my friend Ezra. These are all brothers, 5 brothers. He says, hey, Paul, look at this. Look what he's pointing at. Mud ball evidence? Mud ball evidence? I don't know. Here's Ezra on another rock. He's found another one. Is this a mud ball evidence? Let's take a look at the inside. Look at that. How do you get that on the side of that rock? I don't know, unless it's a mud ball. The one that pointed out to me that, Paul, I think he might have a mud ball here, is Doc Rock, Dr. Jerry Simmons. We're hoping to get him here to speak here with this group, our group in Fort Morgan. He's known as Doc Rock. He has a creation group and a wonderful museum in Haviland, Kansas, which is, just east of Dodge City, Kansas. So it's yeah, I'll tell you, he's good for a tour. And here's the kids are finding rocks and, hey, Doc Rock, what's this? Hey, Doc Rock, what's this? And he'll tell them exactly what he thinks it is, you know. So anyway, lots of things to see up in there. We also have some other interesting phenomena up there that I discovered when I first moved to Morgan County. We've been there about 22 years now. I found a bunch of sand hills and I thought, boy, the roaring 30s must have been horrible there. And we look at a history book and I found a history book that sure enough shows pictures of like this, of the Dust Bowl days in Morgan County, but I really haven't talked to anybody who says anything about it. There's just a picture in a history book. So a few years ago, you remember Dr. Steve Austin was here and he gave a tour down in Colorado Springs. And so during one phase of the tour, I says, Dr. Austin, I says, we have a lot of these sand hills in northeastern Colorado. Can you tell me anything about them, when they got there or anything about them? And he says, they came with the Ice Age. And then he moved on to something else. Wait a minute, come back there. He was busy. So I didn't know what that meant. So sometime later, I got my answer. And that was from Dr. Michael Lord again. By the end of the Ice Age, the winters had gradually become much colder than today. The general cooling caused the atmosphere to dry with greatly reduced precipitation. Wind is largely caused by horizontal temperature differences. The temperature difference between ice sheets and warming tropics were greater than the Earth than they are today. So this would increase and strengthen winds all over the globe. Towards the end of the Ice Age, the reduced precipitation and strong winds caused colder winters, drought, and region-wide sandstorms and likely fires. As the woolly mammoths were suffocating up in the Arctic, we had a lot of sand dunes being made in Morgan County and Nebraska. Here is a very rough view of the sand hills that you see when you drive out I-76. You take off just after you get the split between Highway 85 going north and I-76 continuing northeast, and you get a little ways and you start climbing over a hill. You are climbing a sand hill, big sand hills, and they continue all the way out. And then you get up in Nebraska, you have the Nebraska sand hills. Nebraska sand hills. Nebraska sand hills are well known. They talk about all the time. They talk about the sand hill cranes and stuff like that. They don't talk about the sand hills in Morgan County, okay? The farmers have picked up on that. It might be a pretty good place to raise corn, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Here's a picture of the sand hills from a distance, I-76. And you can see it, this is probably, 3 miles away. Okay, here's another view of the same thing, sand hills blowing. Okay, and here's another one, sand hills. They get some pretty good sized sand hills out here. And then there's finally this one. There's I-76 crossing a sand hill, a ridge. They cut down most of it and kept some of it. Guess what? The sand, I'm told the sand and those, the quality of the sand in the sand hills is good enough to make cement. That's what I heard. I mean, I got to screen out some of the rubbish and trash that's in it, but it's good enough pretty much straight away. And the farmers have picked up on the sand hills being a good place to grow corn, and they do. You see a lot of these pivot sprinklers now on sand hills, and they raise some beautiful, wonderful corn up there. There's a picture of the Nebraska sand hills. I went up there here a while back, studying the Ogallala Formation, and this was just north and west of Ogallala. And someday I'll do a talk on the Ogallala Aquifer, how that fits into Noah's flood. So as a result, after reading the book by Dr. John Morris titled The Global Flood, Unlocking Earth's Geologic History, his recommendation was, don't just read the book and look at the pictures. Go out, take your own pictures. And that's what I have done with God's leading since 2014 when I retired. The last word from his word is, when the rainbow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. Thank you. Now, some of you may have picked up that I'm hard of hearing. My son says, Pop, you're as deaf as a post. Okay, I guess he's right. So if you have questions, Rob will relay them to me.
Okay, so normally I run the mic around and you say your question into the mic. So what I'm going to try to do is repeat the question to Paul. So I will stand up here next to him. So if you raise your hand for a question, I'll point to you. If you can make your question kind of short so that I can repeat it to Paul, that would be very helpful. So let's try this and see what happens. Yes.
What exactly is a mud wall, and how does that compare to the other thing that you described?
So the question is, what exactly is a mud wall? And how does that compare with the other thing that you described?
I was told by, there goes again, I lost him, lost the name. He's a member of your group, or is a geologist, is Barbara. Is Barbara's husband's name? Jim. That he has seen mud balls in a river canal type thing. And we got to talk about it one night. He's seen those. Okay. What the difference is between a concretion and a mud ball, which I think is your question. My understanding of a concretion is that it starts with something inside, usually a fossil, could be nothing more than a piece of a feather or something carbon that is there, and somehow it grows. I kind of think of like a canker or sore or something like that that grows. That's how I kind of envision. And somehow it draws minerals in and it makes a ball. I've got one sitting back here, by the way. There's a round one's about that big around. There's a concretion back here. At least I think that's a concretion. So what's the difference? A mud ball, I think of a snowball. big snowballs. These have been rolling, and you may have seen snowballs that pick up a rock as they roll. And well, that just hangs into the snowball and continues to roll along with the rock. Okay. And so when I seen those, and when Doc Rock pointed those out to me, it just, yeah, this very well could be a mud ball. And if you notice in the slide previous to that, when I showed that area, the immediate area above it is a planation surface. Planation surface, and then there was the area where it was cut out, an erosional area. My perspective on that is what I think is going on, and I don't know. I think is going on is in that planation surface, they somehow started rolling. And when they got to that place where it was eroded, they got to some place and dropped down, and that's where they rested. That's my answer.
Okay.
I ended up reading in a mountain biking book when we went down to southwestern Colorado.
Short question.
Okay, short question. Concretions is basically organic material that got buried quickly. And when, as part of the fossilization or solidification process, the organic material is slightly harder than the surrounding sand material that's there, that's buried around it. And when it weathers, the concretion stays because it's slightly harder. It's slightly harder, and then the rest of the material goes away. And you can
Slightly
see-
harder, like those up in South Dakota, the Badlands of South Dakota or North Dakota.
And what they could describe it as, it could be done, dinosaur done, or something like that. Could be whatever shape that was. And then it gets buried, and then that will form the concretion. It's slightly harder than the rest of the material. You can see this out on the, you can see something, an example like that in the hogbacks on Alameda.
You know, my further understanding of concretions is that the fossil hunters like to find them things. And they'll cut them dudes open and try to find the fossil. That's what I heard anyway.
Okay, was everybody able to hear everything he just said? Okay. Another question? Yes.
I'm speculating on the olive tree surviving the flood. Since it's floodwaters, I'm sure that there's a lot of dissolved solids, certainly a heavy sediment load. But the amount of salinity that is conversion into, I guess, a water that would be more difficult for plants to survive in would not have taken place there. So maybe that's why the olive tree can survive moderate salinity.
It survived because there was a lot of salinity. Is that
Yeah,
what
that's
Okay.
less than a day.
Okay, I know, when I read, but Darwin ran his test, he dunked them in salt water
Right.
and well, everything's lived, you know?
That's what I was thinking. But in actuality, I think probably salinity would be even less. So it would be more easy for the olive trees to survive.
What was the last paragraph? He said it would, he was thinking that prior to the, or during the flood, the salinity would be less than it is now currently in the oceans.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, another question. Okay. Yeah, are there any questions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I guess we conclude the talk.
Let's conclude it.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention and coming tonight. I'll be around. And by the way, the table in the back has rocks and evidences that we have found And Ed Holwood was on some of these expeditions, and he has rocks that he has collected, and so is another resource for you back there as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.